Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the Spiritually Engineered Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human experience from a spiritual perspective. Come on in, and I invite you to stay. So one day at work, I was with my colleagues, and we were having a meeting. And we were having discussions and talking about a lot of things around race and privilege. And we were making our rounds, and everybody was sharing their 2 cents and their experience with it. Then they got to me, and then I started sharing some things for myself at that moment. Looking back, I probably would have changed a lot of what I said and communicated. And that's one of those moments where I felt like I definitely overthink something I did. Overthink a situation and what I communicated in the past. You know, a moment for myself when I recognized that I'm getting caught and stuck in the past. And just, there's this, if, one thing I recognize is that when we get caught in the past about something that we did or didn't do or should have or could have, it's like trying to, for me, sometimes it can play out like I'm kind of replaying in my head or even verbally what was said or what I could have said or should have said, and I bring that into like my present moment. And that's something that can be a very dangerous loop if left unchecked. Thankfully, I was able to just work through it for myself and just kind of process a lot of things and sitting with the feelings that I had in that moment about what post-meeting, about what I had said. And mind you, it was nothing malicious or anything like that. It wasn't like had caused any tensions in the room or anything like that. Well, maybe, I don't know actually. But nevertheless, I wanted to at least share about my 2 cents about the topic here in a way that, is more intentional, more methodical with myself, about such a topic, especially because it's such a very big thing in our society, particularly, and I'm speaking from the perspective of American society. I can't speak on other countries, but I'm not, when it comes to the topic of race and privilege, but I'm sure each country has their own version of it in many forms, many degrees. And, for me, when it comes to privilege, it's interesting. First, let me kind of go here. I was looking at the definition here, where it says, I'll read it to you just to give you this is something that AI would generate, but I'll still read it anyway. Whereas privilege refers to a special advantage, right, or immunity granted to or enjoyed by a particular person or group, often at the expense of others. Which first I want to say, as someone who is of Hispanic descent, Latino descent, I have my mom, first generation of like American born, U.S. citizen. My parents weren't born in this country, but they at some point down the line they got their citizenship. But they were immigrants at some point in their lives, and so and for me, when it comes to privilege, or when it came to privilege, looking at it like from my past, I can't think of a time when in social situations where it's something that's been an issue to me personally. It wasn't really something that I would make a big deal about. Granted, I'm sure there have been situations where I haven't really dealt with treatment based on race in the past. And if I did, like I said, I don't think it's something that wasn't a huge issue. And I was actually, and that might be a privilege in itself of just being minority, and that I don't, definitely I didn't get any kind of type of mistreatment from white people, and I didn't get any sort of mistreatment from you know from my black friends, or not even from my friends at all, or even just black students, or other Latinos or Asians and stuff like that. It's just never, for me, not part of like that experience or what I've had. So just giving some context, but I know everybody else has their own experiences that of them working through challenges based on going through challenges where people experience mistreatment based on their race. Even though I haven't necessarily experienced it much, or can't recall anything very like dire for myself, that isn't to say that other people haven't. But I share to kind of give the sense that there's so many nuances and so many variety of experiences that you know uh, that it can assume, right? Especially like if based on the color of skin, oh, you must have had it rough, or assume that every person of color would have experience any atrocities or any kind of like mistreatments, again based on racism from people, or even introducing systems. And I don't want to get too much into it, because I feel like, I don't know, it seems like there's some aspect of it, like of politics and stuff, when it comes to things like this. And I never want to ever be or consider myself political, or nor would I involve myself in the political atmosphere, just because of the nature of it is so, it's it's very tribal, and it's and people can get really stimulated about things, and help people, even just their perception alone. And this is where confirmation bias can also come into the factor as well too, of people's lived experiences, of whatever stuff that comes up for people. And at this stage of my life, where I'm at now, it's like, I hope I made it clear that it's like, even though I haven't necessarily for myself haven't had any significant obstacles when it comes to like mistreatment based on race, but there's still that acknowledgement that other people have, and they go through it and things like that, for sure. So it's like that two things can be true at the same time, type of thing. A lot of things could be going on. But for me, as someone who's very spiritual, and I try to look at the big picture of everything, when it comes to like privileges, right? There's many types of privileges, where you could base it on class, race, gender, socioeconomic status. And in many ways, when we look at privilege, it's all like a social construct. As a society, what happens, not saying it's perfect. I mean, it's definitely, there's a lot of flaws, and just a lot of things that need to improve as a human race. Because for me, I care at the end of the day about seeing one another as humans. you know I'm someone that, you know yes, I'm Salvadoran by my background. You could say I'm Latino American, but I wouldn't be against even identifying myself as American either. um, but then I know there's some people that get so patriotic and things like that, and it's like, oh, again, whatever you take pride in, that's your right. It's part of your lived experience. So of course, take pride in whatever. There's nothing wrong with taking pride in what you identify, but I think it's important to consider what you identify at the end of the day. And that's why I think this is an important thing, to have a big picture in all of this. And because I can easily, when it comes to privilege, I think it's important to acknowledge and recognize that it's there, but not use that as an excuse for myself to not take action, to not move in my own path in my direction. If I start attributing, oh, it's because of this or that or this, at some point I need to be aware and careful when it starts to become an excuse, because no one can physically control me. That's there's this universal free will that we all have. And yes, again, like I said, I do acknowledge that there are factors at play here. I get it. I understand. But I think if anything can be done about what's going on, I think having a different mindset or looking at it differently would be really important, in my opinion. And what's helped me to be me personally to navigate through, um, you know, through experiences, in social situations, and even looking at it of like things I have to navigate that where I'm affected because of systemic things of our own system. um, and I guess I could take it here as far as like the mindset, right? It's like for me, okay, yes, I'm Latino and I'm proud of that identity, because it's a part of my lived experiences from the culture and just just what I was taught growing up. A lot of things that I appreciate, but then other things that I don't necessarily appreciate, that other old types of thinking and concepts I had growing up that I'm glad I just outgrew. I'll spare you the details on that, but let me tell you, they weren't pretty, they weren't good, they weren't ignorant at best. And that's something that I would really pin on when it comes to like mistreatment of the people based on race. You know, it's all really ignorance at the end of the day, because it's just people identifying with things that are only temporary. Because at the end of the day, you and I, everyone, we're crystal clear spirit. We're a soul. I'm I would always acknowledge that part of me first before anything else. And anything else after the fact, they're all roles that we're playing as part of our opportunities as spiritual beings having a human experience. These are all human roles that we're playing, right down to our ethnic backgrounds. All that stuff. It's our part of the roles. Because when we all pass on, those identities and labels, that all stays here in this planet. It doesn't belong out there in the universe. It's all here in this planet, in this game only. And then just looking at it, so just wanted to introduce that, or refamiliarize or remind you, depending on where you are in your own journey, of just taking that to consideration. And as I mentioned, I just want to emphasize more. It's like I'm not trying to say like forget your role. Like your role is important, what you're playing in all that things, and in your own personal business and social opportunities and situations. It's definitely important to acknowledge it, right? It's not like trying to be, in no sense necessarily am I saying to be totally colorblind and things like that. There's a time and place and there's a balance in things. But I just want to shed light on the big picture to have in the back of the mind, at least what I keep in the back of my mind as I'm navigating, looking at that big picture. I'm a spirit, I'm a soul first. And if you're listening to this, you've probably had other past lifetimes where you're probably a different race, you know. Definitely had some lifetimes, or at least one lifetime, where I was a slave at some point. So looking at it from that framework as well too, you've probably had many roles, not just this current lifetime, but even past lifetimes, with different ethnic backgrounds. You know, planet Earth is a school, and we all chose to be here. Every single one of us chose to be here. We searched for and amassed together a team of spiritual helpers of angels to help us master lessons that we set ourselves out for in our current lifetime. And in addition, we all chose our situations. We chose our parents. Can you imagine having so much freedom, so much free will, being an agent of freedom, a free agent, to the extent that you chose your situations, your experiences, socioeconomic status, gender, class, you chose all that. I know perhaps for some it may stimulate things, and if it does, and if you're listening to this and it stimulates you, I invite you to just take a moment to just breathe, to just be aware of if you're feeling reactive. You know, those can be moments of clues like, okay, I'm being stimulated. There's something going on here. An area, you know, I know for myself when I've been stimulated about something, it's an area within myself I know that needs to be looked at. That's calling to me. An area there that could use some love and attention. You know, when it comes to like honoring the soul need, right? You know, and I feel like for me, when it comes to like this kind of topic and things like that, for me personally, you know, again, being a person, being, you know, a Hispanic, you know, being Latino, even for me, I feel like when we talk about such topics, I feel like I'm walking around eggshells, and I can empathize with those whose color of skin is white, who are white. You know, I can empathize in many ways. I mean, because people can be very passionate, and I mean, and there's nothing wrong with being passionate. But all I'm saying is that there's definitely places where we can really put all that energy towards, and not using it to create division and conflict. How I see in our political atmosphere, a lot of well-intentioned people, but then it's just it gets misused, misdirected, a lot of things, and then ultimately we're just pinned against each other, forgetting of the commonality that we all share, which is we're all spiritual beings having these human experiences from various walks of life. You know, and again, just another example to give some perspective. You know, even just like, you know, let's say for example, clothes and what you wear, the brands and stuff like that. Would you identify with something like that? Would you let that define you? Some people probably would, but I know for many they wouldn't. They have this big picture, this understanding that this one's character is not defined by what they wear, what they have. We're not defined by what we have. And also factor in your physical body, because we have our physical body. We are not our physical bodies. You are not your physical body. You have your physical body. You are a soul. You are a spirit. You are a soul with a physical body. But how often do we buy into this narrative? Oh, I have a soul. We don't have souls. That kind of language is someone identifying with their role that's only temporary, that will be released once they pass on. Is this starting to make sense for you? You know, it comes to a question of like, who are you? What are you? And in my experience, and at this point in my life, I've come to understand who I am is my purpose. What I am is a soul with a physical body. just something to think about. And I think it's important to not to identify with something that's nothing more than just a means to an end. Everything on this planet is all opportunity, all means to an end for our own spiritual growth and fulfillment and our opportunities to be of service. But playing the game, oftentimes, myself included, we get so involved, so caught up in this and that we lose sight of that big picture. We lose sight of why we're here. We lose sight of the simplicity of life. Man, wise man once said, "His life is simple." You know, and I've always said that even though we have our lived experiences and we have those unpleasant ones, don't allow those unpleasant experiences to justify a poor perspective of life, whether it be yours or even life as a whole. Because what I've come to understand working with spirit guides and working with other like-minded souls like myself is that there's actually more that's there for us rather than against us. And really, when it comes to getting caught in things, we're choosing less than what's available to us 24/7, mind you. It's like being a beggar begging for crumbs, a crumb beggar, when we all have the whole cake. And like I said, maybe, and I will acknowledge that perhaps I will never ever claim that I've had it rough in my own life, and I'm grateful that for my situations, for me able to get to this point. And I'm sure other people that through their own predicament have been able to rise above. And just going back to what I said, that we all chose the situations. I think that's something that needs to be kept in mind when it comes to like this talks about privilege and stuff like that. And they exist, they happen, they're there, right? Because of social constructs and how we interact with one another, and what's been happening over the years and things like that. And honestly though, I know that as a collective, we are in a much better place than we were hundreds of years ago. Despite the whatever the stuff that's still going on in our climate and things like that, from a big picture perspective, we've made it so much further than ever before. Nothing's perfect, but I do sense that we've made a lot of progress. And I do believe and always have that hope in my heart that things will get better. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen in progression, much like our own growth and unfoldment happens progressively. We're not going to graduate from this planet, from this school overnight. It's going to take a lot of time, many years. And that's all proportional to everybody. Everybody has their own pace. It's for everybody's own convenience at whatever rate that they're growing. So I care about the individual and the power of the individual at the end of the day. Obstacles aside, okay, life has obstacles. There will be obstacles, but it's how you work with it, how you work with them that shows up. That's the one fundamental truth I know that won't ever change. Yes, there could be situations like that. There could be many, many situations where things happen, but it doesn't ever take the fact away that it doesn't take away the fact that you are powerful as a soul. You are powerful and capable of so much. I'm not saying this just to try to make you feel better, but it's a reality, it's a fact. And I will take that conviction with me to the grave, if you will. No matter what, that's how super powerful each and every single one of us are. And I hope to just remind you, because I know many of us, and myself included, was taught differently. Like we accepted some limitations here and there along the way growing up. Just to remind you of that your divinity within you, the part of you that matters, that will continue going forward once you and I pass on, quote unquote, once we die. But really, pass on, transition is what really happens. All the stuff that these human experiences, these labels, identities, these belong and stay here. They don't belong out there in the universe. They don't belong out there in our true home. But connecting with our true home right now in our current experiences, that's powerful. That's power right there, if you ask me. And I think that's something that it's important to really work towards and practice. Because when life be life, and I know you can relate with this, it's the difference between reacting, fighting, resisting with whatever experience you're having, whatever's coming up, versus working with, rolling with the punches, feeling like things are working and feeling like things are like clockwork, where it's synergistic, like these steps are lining up ahead of you, and it feels effortless to just work through it. Doesn't happen all the time, right? But we can always, I think it'd be necessary and important to work towards it as a practice. And really just go towards what we desire and really create. Because another thinking that I think is very hazardous and dangerous is thinking that life owes us. And I think that's where one of the pitfalls that can happen with this idea of privilege. Again, looking at the many sides to it, not just one. But I can see it from a spiritual perspective. And it can bring about this thinking pattern of just like, oh, you owe me. Even just thinking about reparations, talking about things that people in the past that have nothing to do with us in our current predicament. This getting caught in the past and bringing that forth. Where are we living right now? We live in the present moment right here, right now. Or would you rather be stuck in the past or big deals or stuff like that and getting caught in all the wrongs and all this stuff? It's, part of it requires really, when it comes to looking at the big picture, part of it really requires looking past that, the likes and dislikes and all this stuff. Planet Earth is big and there's a lot of people here, but we're only a tiny grain of sand in the entire big sandbox with so much out there. Bringing that perspective, as again, I just want, if I haven't gotten it to you yet, and I'm sharing this not to try to convert you or anything like that, or I can't change you. Let me be real here, but all I can do is just share my perspective in such a way that helps you look at, the way you see things, and perhaps maybe notice anything within yourself of what concepts and perspectives about yourself, your situations, life that aren't serving you. Really, that's the end of the day. All this to say is like examining what doesn't serve and recognizing them and letting them go and taking on newer, higher perspectives about yourself, about life in general, about your relationships, having that higher perspective because there is a higher perspective. There is. Part of why we're here also in this planet, in this school, is to, and why our spiritual team, our spirit guides, our team of spiritual helpers, why they're here. Their objective is to help us liberate ourselves from the bondage of ignorance and to really unfold and grow and expand in our own freedom. Because there's so much depth to freedom. There's so much depth to it. What I've come to understand as someone who's introspective and does the inner work for countless years, going as far back when I was in high school, but the work that I've been doing has been at almost near a decade now at this point. And when, it's something that I hear when people talk about as well, even people who are in later years, the people that I connect with a lot, are people that are like in their 60s and 70s and 80s, to give some perspective. That's why I know, like, okay, I know I'm onto something. And from writing with people who have had so many years on this planet and what they've put together. And it's like, and if you get this and you happen to be younger, if you're like in your 20s and you happen to understand a lot of this, kudos to you, you're in a really good place. I'm 33, to give some perspective here. If you're, younger and you get all this and this resonates with if this resonates with you in a lot of ways, I just want to at least, point that out, that you're, I want to give you a pat on the back, like, good job for where you are and honor where you are. And even then, like, and I would say that for anybody else, doesn't matter. Maybe this doesn't resonate with you, or okay, this a lot of this is on the mental stuff. Regardless, honor where you are, because we all have our own journeys. We're all going through our own unique lessons and experiences that's unique to us. Very important to remember to honor that. Even, especially when situations or periods in our lives when things don't make sense. And I go through them, and I talk to dead people for a living. It's true. Just because I'm working with spirit guides doesn't mean, oh, I have it all figured out. Alvin's clearly got it figured out, and you guys are still sheepos and still asleep. And no, it's much more dynamic than that. It's much more dynamic than that, than you think. Perception, mindset, attitude, very key players in our lives. And I think it's very important to practice, and why I think it's essential to practice building self-awareness, or even awareness in general, of our environment, of other people. Because it is through that, for me, that helps me to be of service to people. Having awareness of the mechanics, having the awareness of, yes, again, like as I mentioned when I talked about, even though I gave my 2 cents about privilege, but even recognizing that it's still a factor for many people's lived experiences. Awareness, right? Just being aware of all this, not to just it doesn't exist, or this or that. It's just having that awareness of where people are at and meeting people where they're at is also essential to be of service to people. I'm sure you probably, if you're people oriented and want to be of service to people, I'm sure this is something that's perhaps that may have come up for you, or perhaps you come to understand. Regardless of like what happens, like if I make a big deal out of something, no matter what it is, make a big deal out of an idea or a situation, It's just, I can give that energy and power, but I don't have to. Use that personal power of yours to help yourself, to help you move forward in your own endeavors and in purpose and in actions. And whatever your beliefs are, that's all you. For me, I'm just sharing just like my 2 cents in all this. I have no right to say anything else for other people. Again, like I said, this is just, I want to acknowledge everything, because it's like, it's no point in trying to be naive or be like, oh, type of thing. I don't think that helps anybody for that matter. But I hope at this point in the episode that I've perhaps maybe have shed some light for you, and just giving you a perspective out of 8.7, I believe, 8.6, I believe 8, well, say 8 billion people on this planet. Imagine the vastness of experiences that people have that you can't assume, oh, this, and that. So if this is something new to you, just want to let you know this is the perspective that someone has out here in the world. So I hope that, like I said, there's something here that resonates with you, perhaps something to help you think about, and perhaps it could be an opportunity to reflect as a topic for yourself. Just giving yourself the space and time for that, I think is important, because doing this kind of work eliminates a lot of unnecessary stress, unnecessary wear and tear that I've noticed in my friends and colleagues. That's another big picture thing, and like all this to say as well, is to free ourselves from all this unnecessary wear and tear and this unnecessary stress. So, and I care about people holistically, that in people's inner world, because people operate from the state of their inner world. And I'm all about healing and helping people heal their inner world, because it's from that inside out perspective we move even further and faster towards a better world where more people are respecting one another. And that's something I care about, and why I do what I do. So if you made it to this at this point of the episode, I just want to say thank you so much for your precious time and attention. I know you could probably be doing something else. Maybe you'll be doing something else better. But you chose to listen to this episode, and I just thank you for it. And uh, and I just trust that you'll get what you need out of this. Trust, something I always practice and goes a long way. So this has been another episode of Spiritual Engineered. I'm your host, Alvin Cepeda, signing out. And as always, take care, my dear friend.